Hey Rockstars, I'm JB, expert salesperson and master presenter.
I'm the doctor, psychologist, and behavioral expert.
This is the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab podcast. Just the start of BBB, the very first of the Deuce Deuce. Dr. Dre, what's up, man?
Welcome to the Deuce Deuce, y'all.
That's it. Welcome to Better Business Brewing with the Deuce Deuce, featuring yours truly, this guy and that guy, depending on which side of the screen you're looking at. It's an argument on who is the better half. What do you think? Not you, Doc. You don't get an answer.
I'm not answering. I would have said you.
All right. Well, welcome to Better Business Brewing, where we have something to drink, and hopefully you join us. We talk and answer questions and ask questions and get some live questions. So we're super excited to have you all. We should probably pull up like Facebook Live or something, huh? So we can see when a question comes in. That would probably make the most sense, wouldn't it, Doc?
You want to make sense? Like, why start now? Like
at least a few cents. Support the Better Business Brewing, the brewing side of the Better Business, right?
No,
what do you? Yeah, I am doing a beer tonight. I'm gonna pull up Facebook here so I don't feel so alone and confused. What are you drinking tonight, man?
I was gonna go beer. I thought about it, but then I thought against it because why?
So what are you doing?
So it's called like anticipation. You got to build like the anticipation before the big reveal.
I have anticipation. I'm amped up already, man. What is it?
We are doing some Johnny Walker, but Explorer Club collection, which you can only buy at the airports throughout the country or world. And you really have to do it coming back from somewhere, otherwise you can't get it because duty free.
So I have to congratulate you, man. You have picked up a bourbon that I have never tried before.
Oh yeah, so it's the Spiced Road. There's all different kinds of the Explorers Club. This one's the Spiced Road.
Sounds yummy. I like it. I like it a lot.
Not too shabby.
I got to try something new tonight, though. I haven't tried that, so save me a little bit. Tonight I've got some East Side. Can you read that? Dark Lager. East Side Dark Lager. Everybody read that?
East Side.
East Side. I think this is a Milwaukee. My experience with Milwaukee beer and breweries has been kind of limited to my time in college. Milwaukee's Best, specifically Milwaukee's Best Ice, which we just called Beast Ice. And yeah, that's a memory I thought I forgot and was pretty happy I forgot. Hopefully this tastes a little bit better. I'm gonna give it a little try here.
Good old Milwaukee's Best.
Yeah. And we already have some comments, by the way, buddy.
Cheers, yes.
That's not bad. So whomever Facebook user one is, big fan of your podcast, thank you. And infect others with your enthusiasm. Well, I can promise you I will try. I'm gonna pull up Facebook and see if I can actually see who this is so I can give you a shout out for real.
I was just going to do the same. So just for those that are listening, if you are coming on, because we use a different platform, when we see the comments in our platform, unless you give us permission or give Facebook permission, it will come across as Facebook user. So that's what we see. So it's a little glitch in there. Well, it's Facebook wanting control.
Not a glitch. You just need to give permission. And it's okay if you don't. We understand anonymity. We don't like to give permission either.
And as Facebook likes to have control over you, so we know.
Yeah. So that was at least one of those was Mr. Garber. Jonathan, what's up, man? Thanks for the love, dude. Appreciate you. Anybody who doesn't know, Jonathan Garber is a master storyteller. He's a fantastic guy. He's a member of the EML, the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab. He's had some freaking great content out there in our group and elsewhere. So if you're looking to connect with the marketing guru, and I'm just going to call him a genius, he's a great guy to connect with.
So someone got slipped some money beforehand.
Yeah.
No, but he did. He had a great video.
I mean, come on.
He did post a great video inside the lab this week. So, or was that last week? It's all put together.
He did. Yeah, he did.
So if you guys are watching, check it out. Check it out. And if
just
you're
get
listening on
quiet.
the podcast and you don't know what we're talking about, shame on you because we talk about it all the time. But the Entrepreneurial Mastery Lab, same as the podcast, is a Facebook group, free private community where you get to interact and learn about awesome people just like Jonathan Garber.
No. So thanks, Jonathan, seriously, for everything. You're awesome, man. And super excited to kick off tonight. Like we said, it's our first episode of BBB here in 22. The Deuce. We've done this live at breweries before. Obviously, right now we can reach a lot more people virtually, so we're going ahead and doing that. A lot easier to grab a drink with us, no matter where you are in the country or the world. So happy to have you, and we really are here to answer any questions people may have. When people join our community, the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab on Facebook, which you should all be members of, if you're not already, go check it out. It's a community for you, for resources for you, insight, wisdom, and great connections. But we ask people, hey, what's your challenge? What are you dealing with? What's hard out there? And what's your struggle? What's keeping you up at night? And we get a lot of responses back. So this is an opportunity. Anybody in the email that wants to ask us a question live, you're welcome to. If you're listening to this on our podcast or viewing it on YouTube later, all good. But if you do want to ask a question today, you got to join the lab or be a member in the lab. So we're going to look out for any questions that might pop up, and we are going to address, I think some of what came up already this month from people who joined. So pretty excited about that. Anything else you want to chat talk? What you got?
We have some great questions that are coming up. So, but it's not too late to ask a question in the chat. We are that kind of guys that we will work on the fly for you. So if you throw it at us, we'll hit it out the park.
Yep. And per that comment,
baseball season yet?
No, I don't think so. Although it's probably pretty close to pitchers and catchers here. Community, not cult. Are we a cult? Only in the best ways possible. No.
I do like Kool-Aid, but no.
No, not that much. I'm more of a grapefruit guy.
I heard that about you.
Whatever. Stop it. We actually have a question right here. You see that? Once you have a great meeting with a company, how do you follow up consistently without being desperate? Oh, I like this. This is a good kickoff question. You like this one?
I like it.
This comes up a lot from people. You know, there's this sense of desperation, and people, I like to say, can smell desperation, Doc, right? Like, if you're desperate, they can smell it a mile away. They know it. And a lot of times, if we're following up too much, that starts to come across as desperation. So it's a hard balance for a lot of people. And I've got a real clear sense of one of the best ways I manage this. I'm curious what your experience and thoughts have been, man.
I thought you were going to give some insight.
Do you want me to? I can.
Yeah, you're on a roll.
All right. So this is from Chris Malkin, who I'm pretty sure has some good ideas of his own. So Chris, thanks for asking, man. I think setting the stage is probably the easiest thing to do right up front, and just asking, like most things, get some context of how somebody wants to be followed up with. I was speaking with somebody today, actually, and they have a potential case for me, a potential client to work with. They're across the country. I got introduced by a very good friend, and we spoke 2 weeks ago. And then last week I followed up with a text message, and I got information to this person that they asked for, and I didn't hear anything back. So now it's okay if I don't hear anything back, but obviously I need to follow up. So I waited a week and I followed up with a phone call, because generally if you send an email and text and you're not getting a response, there's no harm in a phone call at that point. And we had a conversation, and it came to light through the conversation because I asked, well, it's not really a good client of mine. It's not somebody I have a ton of communication with. I really invested the time into dealing with it. So I just haven't even taken that first step yet. And I said, that's great. And they said, okay, but I'm going to. I said, well, awesome. That's wonderful too. What kind of follow-up do you want from me? What's reasonable for us to do here without it going so far that you're going to forget? Because I don't want you to drop the ball on a client, even if they're not an A client. You I'm sure don't want to drop the ball. And it allowed him to set the stage. Hey, here's how I'd like you to follow up. But I don't think there's any harm in a weekly or every other week follow-up, as long as you're not just following up to follow up. Biggest key of it, Doc and Chris, and Chris, you probably know this, but follow up with a value add. I had somebody else that was supposed to email me the end of last week. They didn't. So I went ahead and I sent them an email this week, but I didn't just email them because they didn't reach out to me. I actually emailed them a resource for them to look at, and that elicited a response. And as long as you're adding value, I think you're going to have permission to be in touch. And that's the key, no matter what the frequency is.
Absolutely. And to add to that, I think sometimes we forget that not one size is equal for everyone, right? We're not all created equal. One size does not fit all. I could put two good sayings together because that's what we do on these crazy Tuesday nights. Two for Tuesdays with sayings in once. But the idea behind that is, play around with it. So sometimes you're going to just check in because people forget, right? People get busy. So it's okay just to send in some check-ins. Now, if you're doing some follow-ups and it's been a while, and like JB said, right, add some value to it and get to know the people a little bit too. So as you are doing those first meetings, get a kind of sense of what they like. You could even ask those kind of questions in a non-intrusive way during that meeting to see what kind of follow-up you're going to do with that person. So you get that insight ahead of time. Oh, like, how do you like to communicate? What's the best way? Are they a text? Are they an email? Are they through another platform? Those are questions you can start to ask them and kind of get a little insight prior to getting into that conundrum. The other thing I think about a lot, I was in the restaurant business, as we know, as a lot of you guys know, for a few decades, and that's a big part of customer service, right? So if you're a server waiting on a table, there's that fine line between checking on someone too often and neglecting them, right? So, and that's different for different people. So you start to pick up that behavior and you look for some cues as you're doing it. So, if you're in the restaurant situation, you walk over and you ask how everything's going or if they need anything, and they're very gracious about it, and you come back and do it again, they're still gracious, and they're okay with you coming over. If they kind of ignore you right away, then they don't want to be intrusive, so you kind of sit back and you watch and you wait for those things. Now, obviously, you can't look at them from the computer screen, right, if you're sending an email, but if you get the kind of responses that are inviting, that they appreciate those responses, then that they're more open to getting more of them. So just looking for some of those cues as you're going, and look, I know it's hard sometimes to take from text people's feelings, but you can do it in certain different ways, and you can lead that with questions as well.
Yeah, and Chris clarified a little bit here, right? He's talking about an elephant, right? So it wouldn't just be any table; it'd be a really important table. Like, so imagine, I don't know, maybe like a celebrity table or something. It's like, well, how do I balance that? Because I'm sure a celebrity would want some privacy. And with a big firm, an elephant, right? Let's just call it what it is. You're elephant hunting. I think you have to. That's where getting creative makes a tremendous amount of sense. So it's not just adding value in a traditional sense. There's arguably, hey, they probably know what you want from the relationship, right? Let's work off that presumption. If it's okay, they know what you want. So the question is, what do they need help with? Where can you solve problems for them? And if you're a realtor, for example, maybe the problem solving is, all the things associated with a move or managing something that you can step in and help out with. If you're a financial planner, for example, and you're talking to, I don't know, estate planning firm that could potentially offer you a tremendous amount of clients, where does that estate planning firm need help? Where can you step in and do something that nobody else is doing to show your value? And that's key. And it could be education, right? It could be thinking entirely outside of the box. It could be making connections for them, whatever it happens to be, going to bat. Heck, it could even be, hosting a staff lunch for a thank you to the staff, to really make the leadership look fantastic. Whatever it happens to be, that type of value add will go a long way in setting you apart and giving you the opportunity to really ask for what you want, which is, be that consistent, amazing referral source for me that I know you can be.
And depending on the size of the company or who you're working with, another thing to keep in mind is use some of those resources that they have built in, right? So generally, the CEOs or some of the decision makers are the ones that are going to ultimately make that decision, but they're generally going to have some sort of assistant, or they're going to have somebody that is their first point of contact, so they're not getting hundreds of messages all the time. So if you get on that person's good side, you can also check in with them to kind of see what kind of communication that their superior is looking for, or the person that's above them in that position.
That's true. When I wholesaled, I always used to bring in truffles, and I would also go to Godiva and get Godiva chocolates for the admins and the people who work the front desk. That always worked really well. And there were occasions I absolutely took the female staff out for getting their nails done. Not saying that I got my nails done too, but I certainly helped sponsor that in order to build those relationships up to have ease of access to the center of influence. So you do what you got to do to get creative.
Right. And again, the purpose behind it and what your strategy is, it could be a little bit outside the box, as long as it's coming from the right place too, right? You're not going to take advantage of these people to try to use them to get your way. But there's, the same way you're going to wine and dine the boss, you're going to wine and dine the employees that have access to that person. And they generally have that control of what gets through and who doesn't get through. So
yeah, I think
making friends is never a bad thing.
We're not talking about manipulation here. We're just talking about a way to set yourself apart.
And you are correct, JB definitely got his nails done. You actually probably got a pedicure while
They look so good, damn it. That's a good kickoff question. I like that. That was a really good one. What else? What else we got, Doc? We got some from people who entered in the group. What else can we walk through here? And Chris, thanks for that question, man. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was all right. You give him a hard time.
We're getting our nails done tomorrow together, so no, I'm not giving him a hard time.
So actually, the other question we had was kind of similar on that same vein, but maybe in a little bit more broad sense. Was the person who had this comment, and I'll give him a shout out real quick. Give me a second. D Maisonette. I might have got that name wrong. I apologize if I did. Asked about one of their struggles is their ability to reach out to people. So I think it's a little bit more broad than what Chris was just asking as far as how to do follow-up, but how do you do the initial reach out, and how do you just get in touch with people? And I'm sure follow-up is part of that, but also just in this time is, where do you feel like if you're bothering someone, is cold calling still a thing? I would imagine that's some of the struggles that they're having with. I'm filling in some of the blanks because it was a more broad question, but I think the ability to reach out in general.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Doc, and it's vague enough. We could bring it a whole lot of ways. Reaching out to people. You think about the traditional ways of getting a hold of somebody, and it is cold calling. It's door knocking. You could do organic networking and tapping your network and going out and networking. You could talk about all sorts of marketing and advertising and sending out mailers and postcards, sponsoring and promoting events. I mean, there's 100 ways, road shows and sponsoring a table at an event. There's just so many ways you could get in front of people that it's a really tough question to answer specifically, but if it's about just reaching out to someone, I mean, more often than not, it's really just getting out of our own way. And if you want to be as successful as possible when you're reaching out to somebody cold, the first thing you can probably do, and we talk about this, Doc, in some of our training, right? Put a smile on your face, become approachable, look like you're in a good mood, and you're maybe not not gonna like punch somebody or look like sick to your stomach because you're so nervous. And I always say, if you're willing to approach somebody and make it about them, It's amazing how that works. It's amazing what happens when you put your energy into allowing somebody else to share instead of just trying to get everything about yourself out there. People like to talk about themselves.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you said earlier might be a good callback here is bringing them some value, right? So cold calling is definitely a challenge, and it's become more and more difficult to do now that there's so many different ways that people get bombarded with messages. They get emails, they get social media messages. There's just so much that we do now, and to sift through that can be very taxing. So a lot of times people just delete. So the challenge is you have to get something that's going to get their attention, that you're going to stand out a little bit if you're just trying to reach them cold. The other thing, obviously, is if you have someone that can introduce you, or through your circle. It doesn't even have to be a close contact, but just someone that would be able to do an introduction is a great way to get that email opened or whatever it may be. And I know things are different now, because I think some of your examples, JB, were right on, but we're not doing those things as much right now. Most of the interaction, the outreach, is physically or unphysically, I guess, in the sense of being through online. You're not getting to knock on doors. You're not getting to do events the same way. So you have to be a little bit more creative in the way you outreach. And that could be a challenge. And that's where I think doing something that stands out, bringing value, same kind of task you'd use in social media, right? Bringing something to people that's going to get their attention, that's going to make them click or watch what you're doing, and seeing that it does bring value to them.
Yeah, the stand out to me is key, Doc, especially on virtual. Now you have to appreciate that when you're on camera. I mean, like this, we're on camera, right? You need to bring more energy. You can't come in with the same energy you're coming in with in person, because it's not as it's harder for people to focus on somebody on video and keep the focus on somebody on video than it is in person. If I'm standing in front of you, I mean, I can see you, I can see your body language, I can tell when you're not focusing. So it's really hard to be across from somebody and really have any sort of engagement if they're not really focused, because I mean, you just know it. But online, a lot of times nobody's fully focused. You got two screens, you got your phone buzzing, you got emails chirping. It's really tough. So I think virtually, especially, standing out is important. And it's not just with value. It's even as much as got to act a little bit. You've just got to bring up the energy level just a little bit. It makes a really big difference. And I see that, and I'm not just saying that personally, but I see that time and time again on virtual. The people who bring the energy, you're going to pay attention to, and the people that don't, it's a snooze fest, man. That's just all it is.
And I think that goes out trying to give presentations and give talks in the same way through a virtual setting is different too. So even where there is some events, they've actually got pretty creative over the pandemic with some of the things I saw. Online platforms where you are actually felt like you're at a conference. You can go table to table. You can do one-on-one conversations with the click of a button. They had tables set up, like vendor tables set up, where you can click on and learn about those companies. So they did some really crazy, fun stuff during the lockdown, which created some new strategies for going forward. But taking advantage of those is, like JB said, you have to catch that attention. I know when I'm giving a presentation, I bought a riser desk. So I know, some of you guys know, again, when I'm in therapy, I'm sitting down, I got to be comfortable. I'm part of the setting that mood. But if I'm giving a presentation or if I'm giving a talk, I want to be up and mobile as much as I can be virtually. So I bought a riser desk that goes up and down depending on the situation I'm in. So there's different things you can try to add to your arsenal that make you stand out a little bit differently than, again, the next person who's presenting.
Yeah. And that, by the way, 100% works. The way we speak and project is different when we're sitting than it is when we're standing. And so if you are looking to bring more presence to what you're doing, standing makes an enormous difference. And so that's a really good idea. We had another question on here, Doc. It wasn't so much a question, just as a challenge. Somebody new to their business and new to sales. So I just want to flesh this out in my head a little bit. You've got somebody who's never been in sales. They're new to sales, and they are now running a business. And when you're running a business, you're wearing a whole lot more than one hat. Sales is just like one of those hats. But that's a big challenge. What do you think it's like stepping into that? I'm just curious. I mean, I kind of imagine that's got to be hard.
Well, it's that fear of the unknown that kicks in right away, which is one of the biggest things that we fear when we don't know what's going to happen next. That creates a lot of anxiety. It's just that unknown. Even if we just do it once and have some familiarity with it, it changes the whole perception of what we're doing. So just getting through that first one, no matter how successful or not you are, is going to give you a chance to get a little bit more comfortable in the motion. And changing some of the mindset around it too. The first thing that went to my mind, and this is something we've talked about in one of our previous in-person BBBs, we did a whole little section on this, is everyone's been a salesperson, right? If you were ever a 9-year-old bargaining with your parents about staying up late, you have sales experience. Or if you want that extra cookie, you have sales experience. So everyone has some sales experience. So if you just shift your mindset with the idea of, I might be new to this setting, but I've sold before, and making those adjustments based on your knowledge and taking from those things that you've already done, you can get some good insight.
Amen, brother. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You might not have been in a sales specific role, and depending on the world you're coming from, there might have been salespeople where their only job was to sell. And typically, if you're in a larger corporation, that's the reality. There's a sales team because it's a large enough company that they can be specialized people in sales that do nothing but. You're talking about like the world I came from, which is a great training to really get intensely good at sales. But most people don't come from that world. And most people, if you step back, and to your point, Doc, if you really take a look and shift your perspective on what it is to sell, you realize, well, anytime I need to change somebody's mind, anytime I need to move somebody and shift their opinion, anytime I'm trying to get something done that requires somebody else's approval, is selling. Now, it might not be that active selling that we're thinking, like here's a product or here's a service and, sign on the dotted line, sign harder, but it certainly is that non-sales selling. It's that persuasion aspect of sales, which is alive and well, and we all have it. So, there are very few people out there that truly never have sales, right? You could be an engineer or computer scientist where you're just creating code, or you're just, an architect doing nothing but, drawing design. That's possible. That's just not most people. Most people fall along the spectrum, like we like to say, Doc. They're in the spectrum where there is some part of their day that is sales. And the median number here is pretty amazing. It's like 40% of our time is in sales, according to a lot of studies that have been done. So this is not something that's alien to most of us. It's just kind of recognizing, hey, I actually have done this and I'm okay with it. But when it does come to truly putting on the sales hat, Doc, I think a lot of it comes down to you need to be able to put in place very simple process, routines, and systems to be successful. And that's something that you don't do in traditional non-selling roles. Like, you might know how to persuade somebody. You might know how to go to your favorite sandwich shop for lunch instead of, that other restaurant you're not a big fan of. You might know how to get people to agree with you, but you don't have a system in place for managing a lot of people and a pipeline. And that's where sales training can really make a big difference, because you do need a process, a system, a CRM, client relationship management software. You need all that stuff in place to be really effective and good, because you're not going to be able to keep it all up, especially when you are wearing multiple hats and you're doing more than just sales.
But even an engineer that you were talking about, they still sold themselves to get that job. So there's still some levels of sales that people go through, and they don't really see it as sales. They don't look at it that same way. And that's where I go back to some of that mindset shift. And I think you touched on something very good, but I want to shout out Heather with some great comments, because she brought in exactly what we said about the kids.
Calling me out, man. She's agreeing with you and calling me out. Everybody sells, JB. Cut the bullshit. Everybody sells.
But prior to that, she said she's learning we learn from kids to sell. Her son's negotiating reading 3 books at night instead of 1. And that's exactly right. You start to sell. You start to sell right away. And she's bringing up to the next point, right? Even sales is relationship building, right? Like that's really what it is. And we talk about that a lot when we talk about consultative sales and building that. We don't really want to sell. We want buyers. And those buyers start with relationships. Because that's repeat business. Thank you, Heather. And what I think sometimes what people miss, especially when they're first starting out, is that they try to do it all on their own, right? This is when someone's starting to play a sport, they start on a team that has a coach, right? They learn from somebody who's done it before. You can learn it on your own, and you can, try and succeed and try and fail and keep going through different situations and keep trying, because there's no such thing as failing, it's just learning. But you can also streamline that by getting someone who's done that before, who can get you in the right direction and get you where you want to be quicker. And not just saying that because we're coaches, but that's the idea of what coaches are. Because even like ourselves, we had coaches, right? You have mentors, you have people in position that have done it before that get you there quicker and get you through some of these things that like we're talking about. You don't have to do it all on your own. And you don't have to wait till you're into it to get that person. You can do that right away, and probably should.
Yeah, absolutely should. It's Heather's going on a little bit here about you need to get rid of the whole idea of ROI. I don't know that I agree with that, Heather. I think we need a shift in the way we look at ROI, and we need to recognize that there are things like goodwill, which cannot be measured purely in an ROI, right? There's no way to assign a specific dollar amount to what my relationship with somebody means and what I mean to somebody and the value that I bring and can bring to them. So I think when it deals with people and relationships, which is what sales is all about, from an emotional intelligence standpoint, ROI should be, kind of put out the door. But I believe in metrics and measurements and being able to really, I think, track. And ROI is a tool to do that. It's just maybe, from a numbers perspective, not that useful of a tool when it comes to like relationship cash. And my camera seems to disagree because I went all blurry, but yeah, I can see if I can fix this here.
I thought it was a scotch.
Yeah. That Explorers Club is really strong, man.
Wow, I've only sipped like 2 sips. But what I think, I'm going to say what I always say, probably the thing I say the most ever. And if you've listened, you've heard me say this before. More than one thing can be true. Right? So these things can be valuable. We could also try to shift away from them. So I think what happens is we get caught up on it has to be one or the other. It has to be like we get 2 choices and we have to pick them. Where most of these things work in concert. So you can use these numbers. You can see, because numbers are good indicators if you're headed in the right direction. They're one of the best tools to see that. But we don't want to rely on those tools. We don't want to rely on any tool alone. And we want to get back to building those relationships. So as you're building those relationships, as Heather is saying there, I think big part of our focus should be on that. But you can use those tools and use those numbers to make sure that the way that you're building those relationships is effective. And if you have to make adjustments in that. So we don't need one or the other. More than one thing can be true. More than one thing can work if we use them together.
I'd be curious, Doc, somebody like this who made that comment when they joined our group. I'd just be curious, have they done any sales training? I mean, they're new to opening a business. They don't have sales experience in the background. Did they do any training? Did they even pick up a book and read? And this is not a knock. I think it's more of this is kind of digging at something which bothers me a little bit, which is if you ask most people, hey, have you read a sales book? I think most people would say no. And yet sales is like the heartbeat of every business. Without sales, you don't have a business. So, and selling is not today what it was in the past. You touched on that. You talked consultative sales. We've been talking about relationship building. I mean, sales in people's minds, when you think sales, you probably think slimy, sleazy. You think pressure. You think commission. You think all these things. that just aren't necessarily true anymore, but they've been ingrained into our heads from previous experience, from our, the generations before us, their experience in sales. Sales today has shifted. And a big reason it's shifted is because a lot of the selling that happens now is happening after somebody's done their research and after somebody kind of knows what they're doing, because all the information is out there, right? Like if you want to go buy something, Doc, the information's there for you. It's not like you need to go to an expert to get information most of the time. Most of the time you can go get that information before you ever talk to the expert. So it's it used to be this idea where, like, as a buyer, as somebody who was being sold to, there was a knowledge gap that doesn't really exist anymore. So sales today is very different than it was in the past. You're just not in that same position. If anything, you're on a much more level playing field with the people that you're working with. And that creates an entirely different dynamic. And anybody who's got this idea of sales in their head of slimy or sleazy, or for like the high school dropout that couldn't go to college and learn a real skill, it's all BS, because sales today requires real nimble thinking. It requires real understanding of people and being able to put yourself in their shoes, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Absolutely not. Heather had another great comment. What she was taught in sales 25 years ago, when she was 2 years old, is a lot different than what it is now. So it's a lot of relearning. And the challenge with a lot of that is the people you're dealing with. There's going to be such a range, because we're not all created equal. But there's going to be a big difference in generations on what people are going to accept and listen to. I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs who try to break into different cells. There's still that ceiling in a lot of places where they won't even talk to them. Like, they won't even acknowledge they're in the room, because of that's how they were trained. It's like, oh, this is a men's world, blah, 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 blah. I'll go off on that whole rant later. But just think about the things that different people face when they're walking into those situations. It's not going to be all created equal. You have to pivot. And to your point of, did these people read books or do any kind of self-training? Don't read one book, because everyone's a little different, right? Like on what they take in. So one person's sales technique might not work for another person. Just like one person's morning routine is not going to work for another person, which you've heard us talk about. So read multiple things and find the thing that feels comfortable for you, because no matter what you learn, if you're not comfortable delivering it, it's not going to be effective, because it's going to show, especially in in a sales community.
And I'm going to double down on that. I think you should be reading a lot of books, and often, because the amount we retain over it's so small, right? And we were talking about this, Doc, just yesterday when we were together, and we were looking through some studies around that. Retention falls off a cliff. The nice thing about really well-written books around things and concepts like selling today is a whole lot of them will reiterate what's being said in the other books. They might say it a different way, but there's a lot of truths that are pretty common from one book to another. So you can read a series of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sales books, and they might all have a different message. They might say slightly different things, but there's going to be certain commonality there. And that's what's going to give you the ability to retain and make you really much better. So you do need to consistently do this.
And
there's no
right.
doubt
And
about
if you maybe are not an audio or visual learner, there's different ways to take this in. We have YouTube now, where you can watch people. You might be more of a visual learner. I go back to the idea of coaches and mentors and masterminds, like getting in different kind of groups. Those are different ways that you can take it in, because again, not everyone's going to learn the same way. And actually, Heather just said the same thing. Actually, learn more from people than I do books. So exactly what I was saying, right? And Larry coming in, being sincere, honest, empathetic, and transparent is the easiest way to communicate your value, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do if you're not practiced. It's actually hard to be sincere and honest when you're have a misconception of the sales world, because you think you have to upsell everything and go over the top with it. And having that empathy and being transparent with it is much more valuable. That's difficult for people that are first starting out, because they have this misconception of what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
There's a cartoon character look to it.
That's an interesting comment from Larry. Sincerity, honest, empathetic, transparent. 100% agree with what Larry's saying there. It's very interesting to me because I just remember early on in my career in financial services, wanting so badly to know everything and to act as if I knew everything. And the reality for me was, well, I had no clue about all the things I didn't know, let alone all the things I didn't know. It was just this massive blind spot that I started out in the financial services world in, and I think that's probably true in every industry. So there's a natural tendency for people to want to do more than they really ought to, and that gets in the way a lot, right? How can you be sincere and honest if you're putting information out there that you think is accurate and isn't? And I see it all the time from professionals, right? I work with a ton of attorneys and CPAs and financial advisors and planners and professionals with degrees and designations and so on and so forth. And I can't tell you how often you get opinions as opposed to facts coming out, and you get people that speak without really knowing what they're talking about. And it's because of this need to be seen as credible and an expert. When you talk about sincerity and honesty, it's like, my gosh, just say, hey, I don't know that answer, or this is what I believe it is, but I'd like to get back to you and confirm it. Goes a heck of a lot in a longer way. And it's in the same vein, Doc and Larry, I think, as staying in our lane sometimes. When we're dealing with an industry or a business where there's so much involved in it, sometimes it's good to say, hey, I'm not the expert on that. Let me loop in somebody who is, and let me bring on board somebody who is. Or this just isn't my sweet spot. Maybe we're not a great fit. So you do that, and it's amazing the barriers that you remove.
Just think how hard that is, though, for people that just started out, because you made the point I was just about to make. But I think we lose sight sometimes when these people say things that maybe not be honest, or it's opinion and not fact. I don't always think it's malicious. I think it's this pressure that they feel to have an answer, because if I don't answer it right now, you're going to go somewhere else that's going to answer it, and I'm going to lose my shot. So they come up with their best solution, and we reinforce that, right? We reinforce that the way we train people when we put people under pressure situations, like answer. And that's how a lot of training was. It's like, if you don't, what do you mean you can't answer under pressure? You can't shoot, like, what are you, not Michael Jordan? Why can't you shoot with the last 2 seconds? And we build up these thoughts that just create this untenable vision of what people are supposed to do. So it becomes like, I'm not allowed to say, I don't know. Or I'm not allowed to say, can I get back to you on that? Because we might not get a chance to. We were talking about that earlier, about getting in front of people and contact, and, like, getting back in touch. You have that fear that you might not be able to do that. But that is a misconception, I think, a lot. And we create that in our own mind. People generally appreciate the fact that you can say, I don't have that full answer. Let me get back to you, or let me make sure I get the answer correct for you, because I want to make sure you get the right information. And if they don't, they're probably not the best people for you to be working with anyways, because they're not going to be satisfied with what you do give for them. Yeah. But I understand where that challenge comes from. I have empathy for those people.
Yeah, and Larry, you hit it on the head, man, right here, because I was about to say, I had this experience. I was listening to a keynote speaker a couple years ago, a very, very, very sharp guy, Jeff Levine, in the financial services world, really well known, and he was giving an example of how a client, I don't want to say was a prospective client, was ambushing advisors, but they were coming in with this really technical question to ask a number of advisors. And the way an advisor answered that question was going to determine who they worked with. And so they asked this really obscure technical question, which is kind of like the answer probably is this, but maybe it's this, and it's really technical. So there's an exception and an exemption, and a third rule around it. And you had to really know the answer really well. But that type of client, I mean, if you think about that, if you knew the answer to that question, chances are you were either very, very specialized in that, in which case maybe you're a great fit for that client, or you could have just been incredibly book savvy and smart, but that doesn't mean you're actually great at the work you're doing, right? Because there's a huge difference between having all the knowledge in your head and actually being able to produce something for somebody. with that knowledge. So I find it very interesting because that's the type of client I would not want to work with. If they're trying to ambush me with a question, there's already a lack of trust there that would concern me. I don't know. It's a really interesting thing, and for somebody to not respect, hey, let me go check on that answer, it is a little crazy because none of us know everything, and being able to step back and say, hey, I need to do some research on your behalf is the appropriate thing as a professional to do, which is really interesting.
So when you were saying that, all I kept thinking back is like watching Jeopardy. And because you're not on the show, you can just yell out answers because you don't lose points. So I'll just yell out answers to every question, and then I get some right purely by accident. And I just feel like the smartest person. They're like, yeah, of course I got that right. Everyone else is looking at you that's in the room is like, oh, how'd you get that? I'm like, well, I just got the last 10 wrong, but you remembered that one. So I was just thinking it could be just luck when these people are answering some of those questions, and we make decisions off of those small data points, which is such a bad idea.
Not much to work with there. That was a good one though. We really went down a rabbit hole on this one a little bit, but this is good. I love talking about this stuff. Good questions, everybody. Great interaction. Larry, Heather, John, appreciate all you interacting. Mark, thanks for leaving us messages here. Doc, we're already like 45 plus minutes in here, man. Anything else you wanted to try to answer for today?
Well, I want to give the people in the chat also an opportunity if they have any questions, because we did mention earlier that that's one of the benefits of being with us live. So I'll give a few seconds. We'll go off the cuff and give them a chance. If anyone in the chat has a question before we go to whatever I have canned in my plain brain.
Mm-hmm. What are you drinking again?
I don't know, but I need more. It's been a long day.
It's been a long week, a long day. Yeah, it's they always are.
So fun story, because we always like to have a little sidebar of how weeks go flying by. I was in my office today, and JB and I were in the office yesterday doing some work, and it was really cold in Florida for Florida. And my office was unusually cold, and we got the heat on, which is always a test in Florida. When you turn the heat on that once every 3 years, you want to make sure the place doesn't burn down. Just want to make sure the place doesn't burn down. And so when I came in today, the heat was still on and it was still warm. And I was telling the story to someone else, and I'm like, oh yeah, it was so cold in here, like way back on Monday. It's nice and warm today. Not even realizing that Monday was yesterday. No reference point to that. It felt like 3 days since I was in there before, and it was just a few hours earlier. So that could give you a concept of how my week's going. But it's great.
A good week. Keeps you out of trouble, right?
Hey, I gained an extra few days. I thought it was later in the week, so I got more time. I just won that battle. All right, so we gave a chance. No one came up with a question. So what else you got, JB? You guys are not too in.
What I got is about a quarter of a beer and a wife and a kid, and maybe an opportunity to call it a night at 8:45 here. No, this has been a good conversation. I've enjoyed diving into some of this stuff, and for anybody listening, if there is ever a need for, I think, sales, training, coaching, even books, right? Just, reach out to us. We've got a ton of resources at our fingertips, whether it's ours or somebody else's, or if it's just a reading list, or even other people to talk to. Heather mentioned, hey, I learn better from people than I do from books. That's great. I mean, one of my favorite things about running a podcast with you, Doc, is we get to learn from different people every week and get insights from them, and we get some really, really damn good insights, and it's pretty cool. So that's a double win for us. We get to create some cool content for everybody that listens to us, but we also get to learn ourselves, and I do enjoy that.
And that is a good a lead into the whole idea behind the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab. The Facebook group is community and learning from each other. We might be the host of the group, but it's everyone's group, right? We want everyone to interact and learn, because there is so many great insights. There's so many other great coaches in there. There's always so many great professionals in there in all different fields. And the insight that comes in some of these, I mentioned Jonathan earlier had a great post last week. Our guest next month, here's a quick tease, STK is will be joining us, and she dropped some great knowledge inside of our group too. So last month we had Dr. P, who's always dropping knowledge inside of our group, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many great resources in there. And while we would love to be people that help you too, if that's what we're not, like you said, not everyone's always a great fit for each other. So we can get you to the resources that are. And it doesn't always have to be about that. There can just be questions like maybe you want to know something. And it could be a quick question that we can answer. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask or post it inside the group. We think it's a great resource.
Yeah. And I'm going to toot our horn here. I think the cool thing about us, of course, Doc, is, hey, you know what? There is two of us. Arguably, we're like very different people. Really good balance, but very different people. So I like to think that there's a broad spectrum of people we can work alongside really well. But I don't think we have any interest in working with people that aren't a good fit. You know, that's just not our MO. It's not who we are as coaches and trainers and consultants. And I think if more people were, I think, a little bit more deliberate and careful about that, they'd have a lot better experience when it came to business and sales. It's a good lesson.
Absolutely. And just while we have the opportunity for people inside the group that are listening and also on the podcast, just a little quick updates for some of the things. We got some really good podcasts coming up, some great guests. So look forward to that.
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard, our podcasts are now also viewable. So you can head on over to the YouTubes and you can put in JB and the Doctor, and you're going to get our smiling faces talking to you on our podcast and our podcast guests. So if you are more of someone who likes to watch along as we're talking, or if you want to watch both, those are the ways you can do it. You can listen to us on the move, or you can listen to us while you're sitting in front of your TV or computer. We make it real easy for you. And that is a new thing that we just started this last few weeks. And it's been really awesome. And I think it's been really fun to see.
Yeah. So I mean, it goes into a great opportunity for us to make an ask here. If you're not a part of the EML, join the EML. You can go ahead and do that. I think the link's being displayed: Entrepreneur Mastery Lab, Facebook.com groups, Lab of Mastery. You can check us out on YouTube. If you do, like, subscribe, follow, give us some love. If you're more of a podcast person, then give us a 5-star review, subscribe and follow. We depend on that for more people to learn about us. And if you see us on Instagram or our Facebook business page or LinkedIn, give us a shout, give us a rec, let us know that we're doing some good out there and we're helping. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. And we do this for you. So thank you. And we're very grateful for any help you're willing to throw our way.
And all those links are at JB and the Doctor, or of course on our website, jbandthedoctor.com. It does help us out a lot. Any kind of interaction you do, a like, a share, a follow, a subscribe, any of those helps us out more than you can know, and we really truly appreciate it. All right,
brother. Dr.
Wrap it up.
I think it's time.
It's time.
Yep. All right.
It's time.
JB out.
Peace out, you.